I'm Debora Chavez. Today I'm interviewing Deb Clong on Friday, February 16th, 2018 at the Kiwani Public Library. So I have some questions for you. I was wondering where you were born
Kiwani, Illinois.
and when.
August 7th, 1957.
Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My father is Donald Henry Clong. He served in the United States Army in World War II, and my mother was a British citizen who served in the British Army in World War II. And he was a pipe fitter at, American Standard Kiwani Boiler. My mother was a florist. And then she took over ran the cafeteria in the Ponce schools.
That's really cool, actually. Your siblings, can you tell me some stuff about your siblings, like who they are?
Sure. My oldest sister is Donna Christine, and her name is Williams now. She has 5 children, one of them deceased. She lives in Clinton, North Carolina, on Big Piney Grove Road. I love that name. And my middle sister, Sharon, is Sharon Pamela. She's now Rubak. Good Polish name. And she lives in Fair Lawn, New Jersey with her husband.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
High school. I went to late entry in the summer of 75 and went in on January 76, so I didn't have much time for anything.
In which branch of the military did you serve?
The United States Army.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted.
Why did you choose that specific branch of the military?
Because I wanted to be a police officer and I could be accepted into the military police program at the time.
What happened when you departed from training camp during your early days of training?
I went from Fort Jackson for my basic training to Fort McClellan, Alabama for my advanced training in military police school before I was stationed permanently at Fort Riley, Kansas, and worked both as a correctional specialist, which is actually a jail guard, and military police in the 1st FB Company, which was attached to the Big Red One.
Do you recall any instructors that you had that were hard on you, or some instructors that you really liked?
Drill Sergeant Grimble. I don't know whether she did not like me or sensed that I was struggling with some of the physical aspects, but she never gave me a moment's peace. And then Drill Sergeant Robertson, he was this big, tall African-American man, and he was no nonsense, but he always pushed me in the right way to be positive about it. And then to celebrate when we graduated from basic training, he led the way back singing Amen from Lilies of the Field. That's what we marched back to. That was fun.
Did you receive any specialized training?
Extra military police training, because since I was attached to the Big Red One, we were tactical, and I went on maneuvers, war games in Germany, and slept in a pup tent in the Black Forest.
How did you adapt to military life, including the physical regimen, the barracks, the food, and the social life?
The barracks were fun, but never turn your radio to hear just regular radio on a Sunday morning in the Bible Belt, because you will get a preacher telling you to repent in a very loud voice and scare the daylights out of you. That's not a good way to wake up. But the barracks were nice. They were a little confining sometimes, but there was plenty of places to walk on especially at Fort Riley. It's kind of an open post. And the food, good days and bad days, kind of like high school. Social life, you made friends because you were all in it together, basically. And so, but the regimen, you got used to the scheduling. You'd be 3 days, 3 swings, 3 midnights, and then you'd start it all over again after 3 days. Then you'd have 3 days off. So you got used to it.
Very structured.
Yeah, structured, very structured.
Did you serve abroad? Yeah.
Yes, I was 3 days in Germany, where like I said, I slept in a pup tent in the middle of the Black Forest, and I also did something called interoperability training. Several of us were chosen, and we got to stay at a German military police training post, which theirs is different. They don't have basic training, and then you go to the various places for advanced. The basic training and the military police training were all at this base, and that's the same for every occupation, was all that way. And there were no women in the German military, so they had to give me officers' quarters to accommodate me because there was nowhere else to put me. And so I got the primo treatment, and we went on maneuvers with them, and I fired German weapons, and I know why they don't kick, because they're so heavy you could barely lift them.
Is there like any memory that you specifically like love to think about, or?
Oh, yes, it was on that very training when German staff sergeant by the name of Eric, the last night we were there, we took a bus, and then we walked half a mile where they had German beer, and they had grilled lamb chops and a dinner for us out in the woods. And of course, I was the only woman amongst 300 or 400 men. Eric was a German staff sergeant, and he decided that I was his buddy, and which meant that no one would mess with me, because they are very strict in their military ranking, and they're honoring their superiors and what have you. And a staff sergeant holds a lot of weight, and nobody was going to mess with me. And Eric became a buddy, but he wanted me to call him Harry because he said it sounded more American. In my broken German and his broken English, we somehow managed to communicate, and we ended up initiating the hat trade. I got his German hat for my soft cap, and before the evening was over, the officers had swapped hats too. But we started it.
If you were on the front lines, what combat action did you witness?
I was not on front lines. I was not in actual war, but I had to guard the general's tent, and I also had to walk the Constantina wire with my M16 at the ready. So I was on guard duty, which is interesting in the middle of the night, especially when all you have for light is a red lens flashlight, and trust me, red lenses do not work. You cannot see anything with those.
How did you stay in touch with family and friends back home?
That was difficult. I sent some things to them, and in letter I said I would try to call them. Unfortunately, when I managed to get to a guest house in Noyon before we came back, that was the one night they weren't home. But most of the time, for Christmas every year, I somehow managed to finagle a 3-day pass so I could go spend Christmas with my parents, which was nice.
What other things did you do when you were like off duty?
Oh, went to the movies, went hiking, and I had a friend who was a photographer, and we'd go traipsing up the hills, because Kansas is very flat, but then you will come up with this hill that's like half a mountain. It's really tall, and there'll be one in a 10-mile radius. That was very strange. But we would go walking, he'd photograph, or we'd drive to Manhattan. Once in a while we'd drive to Kansas City, which wasn't that far away. And so we drove west once to Colorado, which is fun.
Where were you when the war ended?
Pardon?
Where were you when the war ended?
Well, that would have been in Vietnam, and I was still in high school.
How did you return home?
We flew on an Air Force jet to come home from the war games, and you fly backwards. The
Yes.
seats, the pilot's this way, the seats are this way. It's an odd. And since I was the only female on board, I got to be the stewardess and pass out the dinners. And I remember we hit some turbulence, and one of the cans of Hi-C went rolling up, straight up to the general. So I had to walk up there and retrieve it right in front of the general. And he said, "It's all right, Private. I can't believe you actually managed to hold on to the whole tray." Thank you, sir.
When you got home, how were you received by your family and the community?
Oh, they were thrilled I was home in one piece, and they didn't care if it was not war, just war games. They still didn't like me going.
How did you readjust to civilian life when you got home?
When I got out of the Army, I started working in a factory. I don't know if you remember Mailograph. And about the second week when I went home and I had that print in my lungs and in my nose and it's like, oh no, I can't do this. That's when I decided to, I was very lucky. I got the GI Bill and I also got the Illinois State Scholarship. So I started at Blackhawk and ended up getting a BA in Sociology and Anthropology at Sangamon State University, which is now the University of Illinois Springfield.
Have you remained in contact or reunited with any of your fellow veterans?
Yes, several of them. I have one lives in California, and then there's Woody Dillman who lives. I haven't talked to her for several years, but she was stationed in Alaska. And every once in a while I come across, one I was reunited with in Springfield. You just never know, they'll say, "Didn't I serve with you?" "Yeah, you did."
Are you a member of any veterans organizations?
The American Legion.
What have you done since separating from the military?
Oh boy. I have gone hiking in the Badlands. I worked as an office manager, and I finished my career with Dairy Queen as a supervisor here in town, because I came back to take care of my parents because it was becoming difficult for them. So I took over the reins there, and then I moved into Hollis House after my mother passed away. And I had a hip that was going bad. I had arthritis bad, and I couldn't take care of the yard anymore and stuff, like repairs in the house. So then I had a hip replaced and had to learn how to walk again because of nerve palsy. And after that, when I recovered from that, that's when I went hiking in the Badlands, just to prove I could do it.
How did your wartime experiences affect your life?
I did learn one great thing. I wanted to be a police officer until I started strapping a gun to my side. Then I realized maybe that wasn't such a good idea after all. I wasn't so sure I wanted to be one after all. But at the same time, I wanted to do my duty. And I also believe that even though I was allowed to be a police officer in the military at the age of 18, I have since come to believe that's too early an age to give someone that kind of responsibility. I mean, you basically have the responsibility of life and death, and that's a little young for that.
Would you encourage young women to be empowered by this and try to do what you did and go out there and serve your duty?
Yes, because at the time, I was in Germany in war games and I was tactical, yet women weren't officially allowed in combat, which makes my position a little interesting. So I guess you could say I was almost the prelude to women being in combat now. So yes, I would definitely say, if you wish to do it, do it. You're only limited by what you say you can't do.
Are there like any life lessons that you learned from the military service?
I learned that even things that don't go your way, you can make them work for you if you listen. You must listen a lot in the military. That's a good thing to learn.
What's the most difficult part of service?
The physical testing. The running miles. Short distances I'm good with. The sprints and what have you, I had no problem with, but that running that mile or mile and a half.
How do you feel your service shaped your life?
It helped me grow up. I was a pretty naive teenager and I had to grow up. And that was one of the biggest things I think it did for me. And it gave me responsibility. I was a baby. I was the youngest child. And responsibility doesn't come easily.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Much as I wish we did not need a military, I now believe we must have one and we must be vigilant. And the words freedom isn't free is very, very true, because right now we're at one of those points where, much as I'm not too thrilled about our president right now, I do believe that we need a stronger military at the moment. And so, but going to war, like I said, if we were perfect, we would not need to, but there are moments like we learned when they fought Hitler in World War II. There's moments like the man in North Korea right now. It may come a moment where we have to fight it.
Yeah,
We may not have a choice.
Would you serve in the military if you could do it over again?
Yes, very much so.
No question about it.
No question at all.
What do you feel veterans need that they aren't receiving?
The choice program for veterans is to be able to source out. So if there's a waiting list longer than 30 days for a surgery or something, that they be allowed to go closer to home. The only problem is that there are loopholes in it in which veterans that don't have co-pays, that should not have to pay for anything, are receiving bills from the hospitals outside of the VA, and the VA's trying to say that the bills are. I went through all of this before it finally got resolved. And it just makes a bigger heartache for the veterans. Because some of them are invalids. Fortunately, I am not. And it's difficult for them to get to Iowa City. And then you start laying, and they don't have money. And then so that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, some more programs to help them out.
Especially when it comes to, the crisis line is good because that's what this bracelet is. I always wear it. It's to support our veterans, and it's got the veterans crisis number on it. And, but more needs to be done when they come home after walking around wondering if they're going to step on an IED and the mind game it plays on them. There needs to be more done to help them readjust with their families, their wives, their children. They need help.
Yeah,
They
so
need more help. There's not enough yet.
more awareness about.
Yes, more awareness and more assistance for them in more places so that people don't have to drive 100 miles to go to Iowa City or Danville or wherever it is. There's not enough of them.
Yeah, just more access to them.
More access to them, yes.
What message would you like to leave the future generations who will view or hear this interview?
Just remember, even if you're a naive teenager who was pampered. You can buckle down and do it. And even though there may be people who say you shouldn't go in the military, do what you want to do. If you wish to join the military, do so. But don't do it thinking, oh, well, they'll pay for my education. Do that because you want to serve your country, because ultimately that's what it's about.
Yeah, because there's some people who like to take advantage of that, and I don't think that's
Correct.
right either.
Right. But
Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed or we should add to this interview?
No, I think you covered it pretty well.
Why is it important for young people to think about serving?
Because going all the way back to the colonial days, we need a standing army, and it's filled mostly with young people. And I know they're the ones that go into combat, but at the same time, like I said, if we don't have a military, I'm afraid our country wouldn't last too long without one. And if we want to keep our freedom, we need to fight for it.
How long did you serve?
Oh, I served for 3 years. The first year, which consisted mostly of the basic training and advanced training, lying in red clay in South Carolina, shooting a rifle when it's raining.
Would you have served longer looking back on it now?
I do believe I would have, but I might have decided to go to completely jail guard and leave the military police, or gone into a different field, like intelligence or something. But having guns, like I said, having the gun strapped to your side changes your perspective of life.
Would you have served in a different branch of the military?
I like my army. And I think it's also because my parents were in their armies, so I decided to follow suit.
So I wanted to know a little bit more about like the correctional. You said you were like a correctional.
I worked in a correctional facility in which the only person to ever escape was a Marine who was caught hitchhiking on a major U.S. highway. And we only housed 364 days or less. And escaping automatically gave you 5 years in level work. So he did not do himself any favors.
How do you feel your service was different from your parents' service?
Well, for one thing, we were not at the crisis of trying to stop Hitler from taking over the world and destroying all the Jewish people. And they weren't having to, their rationing was so severe. A pork chop would be a week's worth of meat rations. And so they met in unusual circumstances. And of course I served in peacetime, which was fortunate, even though I got a taste of what it would be like if we actually went to war. The war games, I mean, in the back of your mind you knew they were games, but at the same time you realized if you lit that lighter to find something, you would have made yourself a target. You know, and so I got a taste of what it was, and it's frightening.
A lot of mind games go with it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
How do you feel that veterans are viewed today versus veterans from Vietnam?
Oh, night and day. It breaks my heart to think there are still a few idiots. I know a chaplain who served in Vietnam, and every once in a while he still has someone come up to him and call him a baby killer, and he never even had a weapon because he was a chaplain. And it was so wrong. Most people have realized just how wrong it was. They don't know what they went through with the Agent Orange and all the terrible, terrible things that happened to them. They were doing what they had been instructed to do. So if there was anyone to blame for it, it was not the soldiers. They were under orders. But now, it doesn't, I mean, they stand in line, they give them parades. They treat them like heroes when they come home now. So it is a totally different atmosphere.
Like you said, it wasn't their choice. They were under orders.
Right, right. But I think maybe Vietnam taught us a lesson that blaming the soldiers is not going to help anyone. Sorry. That's fine.
Do you talk about your experiences with other veterans?
Yes, yes, especially if I go to Iowa City for a doctor's appointment or to Galesburg. Yeah, we'll sit and chat. Which is very different from World War II because when they came home and from Vietnam, most of them did talk about it. It was kind of a brotherhood. You just didn't talk about it. My father never talked about it.
You know, like you said, like with the mental awareness and stuff.
Yes, yes.
It's difficult to keep it all inside, and it's better if there was
Right.
more awareness and there was more people, more therapists, or someone they could talk to about their experiences.
But, especially the Vietnam veterans, and actually now the Desert Storm ones, because like I said, walking around wondering if you're going to step on an IED, if there's a sniper somewhere around there. You live on edge for so long, you need help getting rid of the edge and being able to relax.
Yeah, you need
I think
help,
that's
like,
the
to
big thing.
acclimate with your family and everyone
exactly.
around you. Do you know any veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder?
Yes, I do. However, he is much better than he was. At least he says he doesn't wake up at night screaming anymore. He would wake up screaming thinking he was, but he has improved. But see, he sought help, but he still has to drive a distance to get it, and that's an issue, like I said, that needs to be addressed.
Even a hotline, like you said, that would help.
Mm-hmm.
Just someone to sit there and listen.
Right.
Overall, was your experience positive?
Yes, yes. I learned a lot when my 3 years in the military, and I'm so glad I went in.
Like you said, it made you grow up and
Yes,
grow
made me
as
grow
a
up,
person.
see life in a different way, and realize how important service to your country is and what it entails. And you carry that with you. At least I do. I still carry that with me to serve my country whenever I can.
And that's a pride to you. That's
Mm-hmm. It
you're
is.
proud to do that. Well, I want to thank you for coming to this interview and answering our questions. It was great to hear your story and your experiences.
It was wonderful to be here.
Thank you.